happy for me to record the session. Again, you can give me a thumbs up, a prompt. Um, okay, I can see Becky with a thumbs up. Fantastic. So first and foremost, rather than necessarily a structured session, this is all around kind of accessibility and learning development, and I have done previous sessions on designing for accessibility. Today's session is looking more at delivering training in an accessible way. So this is your time. I appreciate you making yourself available during your lunch break, unless you're on a different time zone, of which, of course, could be a different time of day. I'm very keen that you get what you want from today's session. So if whilst we're getting started, if you want to let us know, okay, well, where you're joining from, do you know what your role is, and the way you're joining from could either be company, can be geographically speaking. Just let us know, okay, where you're joining from today, and what you'd like to get out of the session. Because as I say, I am keen that we tailor the session to your needs and making sure you get exactly what you want and expect from the session itself.
Did you want us to
Uh,
type it or uh
we can invite both. So if you have a preference to type, if you have preference to come off mute, we can absolutely allow this to be a user-driven experience. So if you're happy to kind of talk about it, that's fine. Or I can yeah, or you can type as well. So I do have access to both.
from my perspective it's so I run it where am I based? Birmingham in the UK.
Okay, yeah,
Um
very new. I'm in Rugby in the West Midlands,
oh,
so
very
kind of
near.
you probably hear the Bristolian accent. So from Bristol, but yeah, live just a couple of miles from you, I suppose.
Yep, cool. And I run a design school as part of our agency. So it's just a case of making sure that we're doing everything we can really in terms of making our training accessible. And if there's anything that we could be implementing that we're not, just yeah, being made aware of that.
Sure thing. How about yourself, Raquel?
Hi. Yeah. Hi, Becky. So yes, I actually work in the same company as Becky.
Okay.
And yeah, so I am quite interested in just in enhancing my facilitation skills overall, and as well just yeah, learning how to make it more inclusive. And also, I wasn't too sure about the approach you would have today, if it
Yeah.
was like more corporate or not, but also my nephew recently got diagnosed with a certain level of autism. So like yeah, just in general, like, didn't know what approach, if it was more like adult learners or younger learners, but I think yeah, just general information is always good
I
to
think
have.
I think the fact you're from
Um
the same company, and the fact that we're slightly quieter today, can allow us to be a bit more hands-on. Although, Caitlin, I can see you're from Massachusetts in the United States, so you want to immerse yourself in accessibility best practices and learn more about what you might be missing in practice. So it sounds like we are aligned in goals and approach. Um, so yeah, I say I've been in this space. I have been delivering content on accessibility since the fall of 2017. Um, I left my full-time job on March 18th last year, and on March 24th, Accessible Me was founded. I founded the business to make all the world's content and all of the world's spaces accessible to people with disabilities. We do that in kind of one or more of three ways. So number one, we audit content against the Web Accessibility Guidelines. We go beyond the WCAG guidelines though and look at user experience. I know some people would argue, well, that's universal design, but ultimately you could hit all of the WCAG criteria and still use ableist language, gendered language, and other things. So we provide reports off the back of that to help individuals understand where they may have some developmental areas. Secondly, we provide remediation support. So, if the content is broken, we can get in there and fix it. And third and finally, we do training on the topic of accessibility as well. So, that training might be understanding the WACA criteria in terms of learning development. Um, it might be self-paced. A lot of our content is self-paced. So we very much like the flipped classroom approach. One of my biggest bugbears is in e-learning in general, is that there will be a multiple choice quiz more often than not at the end of it, which if you complete it, kind of goes, "Congratulations, you've passed," or try again. Whereas if you haven't understood, there's often not opportunities to go in and to ask questions. So following our self-paced learning, we normally have some scheduled Q&A sessions, allowing people to come and speak. One of the things we often say or try and advocate is the only question that's a silly question is one that's not asked. If you have the question, chances are somebody else does. We also in October last year launched our accessibility themed escape room up in Edinburgh, and it's not a fixed occasion. We just happened to launch it, as part of the Learning Network's Mastery Days on accessible learning. And what that does is it puts people in a hands-on immersive scenario, where they can experience some of the disabilities for themselves. So, for example, we have 10 different pairs of goggles or headsets which simulate different visual conditions, such as anything from tunnel vision to double vision to blurred vision. We have gloves which will restrict hand movement, for example. And when you A/B test to go, okay, those who've been through the experience, how do they engage with the learning and training versus those that don't, actually is significantly higher. That if you've been through the experience, you experience it hands-on, they're much more likely to attend sessions like this, and be more proactive. In terms of why that experience was created, a lot of our initial conversations as a business were either for quite often middle managers, and they needed to convince the leadership that we need a pot of money to spend on this, like to say this is why it's important, or they have teams of people who are like, we're already busy. Why are you asking us to do X, Y, and Z on top? When we've already got these deadlines to hit? And for me, I often say like if your content is accessible, it's not finished. And ultimately, if you look at the design process, the design, um, development, delivery, things get exponentially more expensive the further down the line you go. So if you can fix something during the design phase, quite often you can save a lot of money, and it's almost by a factor of five. So by the time it moves from design to delivery, your costs go up. But certainly by the time you have gone to release and you have to do recall, say for example, you're working with a large bank and you've finally got that SCORM through all the processes, and is now on the LMS, only to find there's a spelling mistake or something else. That process can be a long one. Now, in terms of where we focus today, I guess let's hear from you and where you're at. So, are you focusing more on adult individuals? Working with adults? Are you working more with children? Or I suppose a hybrid, because we can absolutely tailor the session to suit. So I can see adults seems to be the mainstream, which is handy. So I think first and foremost, working with adults, one of the things I try and encourage most train or any training company to do is to understand who is going to be part of the session. So I guess you've answered you're working with adults. Is your training more often than not, is it in person? Um, is it webinar based, in a setting like this? Is it remote? Is it a hybrid? What sort of format are you typically delivering in?
We
You can
deliver online, remote, live, or in person.
okay. So it sounds like there's a good mix there. So that's a very good steer. So in terms of where to get started then, one of the questions I always get is, how can we design for everyone? Realistically, you can't. There are 526 different disabilities or conditions that an individual could have, and they could have more than one. But if if you the more information you have on somebody in advance, the better it is. Now, I know today is looking at kind of delivering the sessions more specifically, but if you have training which is annual, and if I use an example of one of my larger clients, such as British Airways, they have mandatory training which people need to come and have on site every single year, just to be compliant. And there are a number of training modules out there, such as your fire safety, your health and safety, which kind of follow that training. If people are arriving to these sessions having to let your trainers know time and time again, that they have a specific condition, it might be dyslexia, dyscalculia, it might be they are hard of hearing, I think disclosure is always one of those. Ideally, you would disclose once and somewhere that can be stored. I know there are challenges with GDPR, for example, but any information on your learners up front is going to be massively important. And then when you start a session, whether it's in person, whether it's in on online, one of the key areas it kind of starts from the introduction. So I think many of us will know if you allow people to speak, if you have 30 people in a room, 15 people in a room, and you say, okay, let's start with a round of introductions, that can be half hour, of your learning gone right there if people could tell it. So when you start your session, a good approach very often is just to go introduce yourself as a trainer. If you think it inclusively, not everyone could necessarily see you or hear you. That might be through permanent disabilities, such as they might be hard of hearing, they might have little or no vision, or it might be technical restraints as well. So, say for example, I have a very poor internet connection. It could be the videos cut out. So, do you know what tools, what practice can we have in advance? So, today I am delivering right now through Zoom. I have the closed captions on by default. So one of the things we have done is allow people to turn on captions if they wish. And you'll probably notice the pace in which I'm speaking now. There are a number of tools out there that can help you. A lot of tools these days, whether Zoom, whether Microsoft Teams or Hangouts, they will have some form of automatic captioning. And granted, they aren't perfect, especially if you have a strong accent, such as myself with Bristolian. It it struggles on certain words such as Wales the country, Wells the animal, and a wishing well. Sometimes that looks all the same. So the pace is certainly one area. The pace in which we speak, the more you can articulate what you're saying, the more you can say at a sensible pace, the more likely it is you're going to get a clear and accurate transcript of what you're saying. Then if you go beyond that and look at the introduction, as you'll have noticed, I started today's session with just an overview of who I am. I am Mike Osborne. I'm a neurodivergent founder. One of the things I probably could and should have done is to say, okay, I'm Mike Osborne. My preferred pronouns are he, him. I will be leading today's session, which will be running for the next hour. If anyone has a hard stop, that's fine. We can absolutely, respect your time today. But I will be available following the session for a couple of minutes. So if you don't get your questions answered during the call, feel free to um, stay on after the session. Feel free to message me in chat and I will pick them up. So what I am by kind of just giving that introduction, trying to create that safe space. I have shown some vulnerability. I have shown that I myself am a kind of neurodivergent founder. I have set expectations of the length of the meeting. Do you know that this is going to be an hour? So if people were expecting differently, if they're expected half hour, they haven't budgeted. If they're experiencing planning an hour and a half and it's falling short, it allows them to understand what's going on. Now, another important aspect for many is the agenda. If you are able to show the agenda in advance, either through, well, right from the booking process, you would have likely found my session today through Eventbrite, where we had a bit of agenda of what we will cover during the session. To start the meetings by going through that agenda, we'll allow people to know what to expect. So, are you covering what they are expecting you to cover in the session? And I know some companies or some individuals really don't like things like the learning objectives. Today you will learn, and they list two or three points, and whereas actually, if you're a neurodivergent learner, setting the expectation, you might not say today we will learn, but at least to tell them we are going to cover X, Y, and Z, so they have expectations. Um, will allow them to follow along, and just by having the agenda or the structure, it will allow you to kind of format some of your interactions. Another thing, whether you are in a live set situation or a um, in a physical one, we think about the interactions with your learners. Now, if, for example, when I give the example earlier, if you could just comment in chat, um, be mindful that not everybody has the dexterity to comment in chat. It might be they have limited ability. It might be they are a non-native English speaker, so to think about writing in English takes them a bit of time. So one of the good practices is to think about the interaction. So this comes back to the design a little bit, but also very much affects how we facilitate and how we deliver the sessions. So the more you can build things into polls, for example, if you can poll your audience and give some example answers, you could always include an optional not sure or prefer not to answer that will allow people to engage without having to write blocks of text. It allows people just to kind of be seen, be heard, but also it respects the. I've got to try and say this correctly. Anonymity. Like if people don't feel psychologically safe to answer, polls are a great way of allowing people to interact quickly. Now, in a classroom, you've got multiple ways of doing this. You could still use tools like Slido, which is a great example I was using just earlier today for Fujitsu. Um, there are a number of tools which allow you to live polling within the tools. The Google Suite, I believe, has some pollings built in as well. Um, but the one of the great things about that is they can be used whether you're delivering in person or online. And you might ask, okay, well, I could simply avoid the tools altogether. I can forgo the tools and ask for a show of hands. But then you're putting people on the spot. So in a session in a session I delivered earlier today, we asked the question, how do you feel about speaking up in meetings? Now obviously you allow people some time to think about their answers before contributing. But I'm sure for many of us, whether it's a session we are delivering, a session we are running, or whether it's a meeting with our managers, our peers, by giving people as much of the notice in advance, so by having the agendas, by letting people know what questions may be asked, it all gives people an opportunity to think about what they want to say rather than put them on the spot. Another one, I suppose, as well would be cameras. When people join the session, quite often people will join with their cameras off, with their microphones off. If you can set the expectations just to say, okay, it would be helpful for me to be able to see everyone today, but not to try and highlight or indicate that not being on camera is rude in any way, because people may have a multitude of reasons why they're not joining on camera. It might be, um, for example, they are a carer looking after somebody with disabilities. It might be they have children. It might be technical bandwidth. It may be disability. It may be not. But you can when you're making that introduction by encouraging people to speak on camera, you can speak about some of the accessibility. You can throw that into the mix. So, for example, by being on camera, if anyone is following along with the closed captions, if they have dyslexia or low literacy as well as being hard of hearing, then they might be able to lip read. And lip reading is something very important. And that's where, again, looking at your audience, thinking about your camera, your positioning, all of these things can make a big difference to delivery. So if during the session I'm speaking to the side, I'm pacing along the stage, all of a sudden that line of sight, to my lips, to my speaking makes a big difference. For the last couple of years now, I have been taking part in something called Toastmasters. Are any of you aware of Toastmasters and what that is? If not, I can kind of give a brief overview. So I can see some shaking heads. So Toast, if I reverse the clock about 5 years or so, I would have never seen myself delivering a session like this to a group of people, let alone speaking into audiences of 130 people, as I have done with learning technologies, for example. When I Before 2020, before I was one of the 30 under 30, the thought of speaking on stage was terrifying. I have the usual things that a lot of people do with the imposter syndrome, creeping in. Um, are people actually going to care about what I have to say? Um, but I have the added thing as well is okay, if I tick during the meeting as part of my conditions with Tourette's, it can completely derail me. So by having my notes, having my script and stuff like that, it can be really helpful. Now, Toastmasters, what that is a public speaking practice, basically. It's a global network, and you can probably find, if you Googled Toastmasters, you would find opportunities to speak near you or online groups. And Toastmasters is broken down into there'll be a Toastmaster for the session, someone who conducts the session, almost like a chairperson at a conference or a chairperson in a round table. You then have prepared speeches, which is you will know you're delivering a speech at an upcoming session. Those sessions get evaluated. So they Someone will listen to your session and make notes. Then you have table topics as well. So the table topics is an impromptu thing. You'll have a table topics master, which will allow you, which will ask questions. They'll ask a question and then they will invite somebody to speak. So if any of you are new to facilitation and want to practice and build your skills, definitely consider giving Toastmasters a go because I have certainly found prepared speeches is one element, and when I started those, certainly if I knew I only had 2 minutes left, but I had a couple of slides or I had lots more to say, my pace would speak up, would increase. I would be speaking, and quite a lot of the audience in my Toastmasters group are Indian or non-native English speakers. So by regularly practicing in these safe environments, remembering that we're not here to judge, we're not here to make fun. We're all here with the goal of becoming better speakers. These are all ways in which we're going to increase your confidence in these public speaking scenarios. So Toastmasters, it's a membership thing. So there is a sign up fee and like an annual fee. I'm not necessarily affiliated with the Toastmasters network, so I don't get paid anything by making these referrals. But for me, it has been a fundamental game changer just to have these regular opportunities to practice. And I find the table topics more than anything have been particularly good because they have they force me to think on my feet within a minute or two. In terms of what that means for today and today's session, in terms of delivering in an accessible way, pace is going to be very important. I come back to the point I was saying earlier regarding the on-screen captions. The captions are going to be more correct if you can speak slowly and if you can articulate. Um, the design of your slides as well, can make a big difference. So when you have rather than having blocks of text on your screen, if you can actually reduce that and have instead an image or an icon, that way, if you do have dyslexia, if you're a non-native English speaker, or you have other conditions, by having an icon which is indicative of what's trying to be said, it allows people to follow along. I come in back into the point of timed interactions. So I commented earlier on speaking in chat. If you look at some of the different disabilities and how they might broadly be categorized, you may have cognitive disabilities such as processing. You need a little longer to think. You may have visual conditions such as low vision, reduced vision, double vision, for example. You may have reduced hearing, which can be little to no hearing. You may also have, though, a speech condition, which, so if you have a lisp speech impediment, you might not necessarily um, be comfortable in speaking, especially if these things are making you flustered. So try and think about, okay, when you have an interactivity, what is the goal of the activity? Is if it's to give everyone a fair opportunity to speak, then actually by having um, as I say, the poll is one option, but the ability to either comment in chat or to kind of raise your hand, come off mute, um, all of these things are going to make a difference. And if anyone's worried about kind of audience participation and getting somebody who is one of those speakers who can speak for a long time and not necessarily curtail it by setting expectations. So if I was to throw a question out and kind of pick on individuals and I want to kind of curveball that, if I can say as an example, Becky, in a minute or two, or in a few sentences or less, could you tell me about your experiences on? It sets that expectation that rather than kind of going on for a couple of minutes, um, that you want a direct answer. And then, but also, the more we can do um, getting people to volunteer if they feel comfortable. If you've given those multiple opportunities to connect, so for example, if during your session you have a live Q&A, so people can ask questions throughout, um, where possible, if you have a lead trainer and a moderator, I'm missing my moderator today because of illness, but that allows the trainer to kind of to do their piece. The moderator's role would be exactly that, to monitor the chat, to check for questions. And again, some people may think of the trainer versus moderator as purely an online thing, but if, for example, you are delivering a session at a conference, if you're taking questions through Twitter, for example, or social media using the hashtag, if you have another means of doing the QA, you may find people are much more comfortable writing their question down rather than um, asking it themselves, and this comes down to cultural norms as well. Now, in the West, if you create a safe, psychologically safe environment, hopefully you're going to get quite a lot of participation. If you then look geographically speaking at some of the Asian countries, where neurodivergence is still a bit more of a newer topic, particularly down to things like Korean dramas showing if you're neurodivergent, you're probably a social recluse, you're unable to make eye contact, it is still very stigmatized. They have the concept kind of in Japan, in China, and a lot of the Asian cultures of face. So if I ask a question and somebody can't answer, or if even if I just ask the question, essentially I'm positioning myself as somebody who may not know the answer, especially if I'm meant to be the expert, if I'm meant to be the authority. So the more we can give people the opportunity to volunteer the answers in an anonymous way, the more likely you are to hear from everyone. Timing is certainly a big factor on that one. Just giving people time to be heard. And if you do ask a question from a member of audience, even if you have said in a minute or two, if you realize then once they start speaking that actually they need a bit more time to articulate what they're saying, it may be a neurodivergent condition, it may be a speech one, but just try to resist the urge that a lot of us have in terms of finishing their sentences. Do you know, if you are, if you have, if you imagine what that feels like for us as people, as trainers, or just human beings. One of the reasons we focus at Accessible Me on the people first approach. So there is the medical model which looks at the disability and the condition. There is the societal change which looks at the person, the ability, and then people first looks at the condition. So rather than saying I am a dyslexic individual, you'd say this is a person with dyslexia. I try and get companies and people to think, okay, this is people we are designing for first and foremost. You know, would you like, as an individual, in terms of empathy, to be interrupted with what you're saying, Drew? There's a good chance um, you wouldn't, and you'd be frustrated. So there's, yeah, I guess by knowing your audience is is going to be a big factor. And if you have people who are hard of hearing or and have a interpreter, try to make sure you are speaking to the individual who asks the question, as opposed to the interpreter, to the person signing. Because again, in any interactions, we want to make sure we're focusing on the individual. Similarly, if you're speaking to a wheelchair user, whether this is in person or in society, try to make sure we are speaking to the individual in the wheelchair and not the person who's with them pushing. Make sure we are centered on the individual we are speaking to is probably one of the areas that I can highly recommend first and foremost. I'm just keeping an eye on the chat and I can see Raquel saying you've got an internet connection, so the slower pace has been helpful, which is very good. So hopefully yeah, this has been helpful content. I appreciate we got about 20 minutes left of the session. I myself don't have a hard stop, so if people want to stay on, they can. But I appreciate if you have a meeting at 1, you may need to drop off. But yeah, how is this resonating so far? I appreciate I have been speaking at you for quite some time now. I'm aware there is a lack of slides, and that is by intent. What I wanted to do is to, rather than have these text-heavy slides with lots on it, the ability just to be able to have these kind of smaller, intimate conversations where you can follow along if you have the closed captions on, for example. But just the ability to see each other and follow on, I think, can make a big difference. But at this stage, are there anything that's kind of sticking out to you as things that are necessarily new, that have challenged the thinking, or are there specific areas you have any questions on in terms of your approach to facilitation? Because obviously, as I said, this is your time, and my approach very much isn't to speak at you for a solid hour. It's to try and make sure you get what you need from joining today's session. And again, I don't mind whether you use the chat if you want to come off of mute. One of the things I would typically say if you're delivering virtual sessions, a great way to manage that multiple people wanting to speak as a busier session is to try and use the raise hand feature. So, for example, if you want to say, if anyone wants to, feel free to use the chat to enter your comments. If anybody wants to come off mute, then please use the raise hand feature, and then I will pick in a volunteer to speak. A lot of these tools like Zoom or Teams, when people do use the raise hand feature, will allow it will, and you click on that, it will show an order. If this is the order in which people have raised their hands, um, which which is can be quite useful, just in terms of making sure somebody's not sat there for a long time, not being heard, and the person who interrupts um, is the first to be heard. So that is certainly one area. I'm not seeing questions in chat at the moment. I'm not sure if that's because you don't have questions per se, but if you do have them and you're interested in certain aspects. So uh, hopefully I'm saying it right with Catlin. So you've either reinforcing what you already do, the corporate culture doesn't support, which makes you question your designs. So I think it's great that we are reinforcing some of the good practice. Hopefully, if there is anything that has been new or surprising, but also if there's anything you want to challenge, hopefully I've created a safe enough environment, for you in order to be chasing that. Um, okay, I can see nobody's looking to come off mute and no hands at the
Yeah,
moment.
um, I'm on mute.
Okay,
Yeah, just sorry. Also, my internet's been coming in and out.
I
Internet
understand.
connection. But yeah, I guess just like when you're running an online session, and obviously like there are those options around the chat and
Yes.
or the polls and things, but I don't know. I've been in spaces where like the feedback is that actually those moments where there's a lot of conversation are like the richer ones, but
Yeah.
then it's like how to mediate that because in the sense that sometimes there are voices that are more predominant, you know, and I guess in a way it's also like, we're all adults and people have
Yeah.
different ways of expressing, and there are extroverts, introverts, and so it's if you are providing those options of having like a more just a chat or poll or more anonymous ways, and you're having those like more one-to-one like group one-to-one or individual, or like you're having a bit of a mix. Is there
Mhm.
any other ways of like just making kind of trying to get that feedback that people are engaged in understanding? Um, if you get the tendency of just certain voices over certain
Yeah.
voices.
So group size is quite a big one, quite an important one. So one of the things I try to do at Accessible Me, and this is through this summer, I will have been in learning development for 13 years now, both on the design and the delivering side. Typically, I find groups of 3 to 4 is pretty good for a breakout room, whether that's a virtual breakout room or whether that's on tables. And in terms of numbers of groups, you can scale that up quite nicely. So quite often for a typical session, I would when a manager is asking, how long this should be, I would look at a group of say 18 to 24 people, um, where you have 6 teams of 3 to 4 people per team. The reason I try and keep those small, more intimate groups rather than smaller, larger groups is exactly down to what you were saying. It's if you have big groups, you often have the dominant voice in the room, the person who is always willing to speak or speak up. And especially if you get 1 or 2 of those, and then you can also get the quieter voice, the person who doesn't speak up either because they are an introvert. Um, it may be that they are not speaking up because somebody in their group is more senior, and certainly if you have, say for example, you're in a breakout room and you've got your manager or your manager's manager, are you going to contribute in the same way if you're just speaking among your peers? So I think looking at who is in the room, if you can largely group by kind of level of seniority. So rather than if you thought about you have a room full of people and you've got a percentage of the population are managers, and some of those are not. Rather than try and go, okay, I want to try and be even here. I want a manager in each team. Actually, consider putting the managers together because then you're not um, defaulting to the most senior person in the room. Which so I know this is generalizing a little bit, but certainly in kind of Eastern cultures, there's that level of authority both in age and seniority. So if you are in a room, you may not volunteer. And then there's the imposter syndrome side of things. So, it might not just be that I'm an introvert. It could be, do I have an ability to be heard? Do I have the confidence to do it? And again, by anonymizing where possible. Another thing you could do if you wanted to prioritize in a group is if you have a system whereby people can contribute the answers to in advance. So if you have some kind of type form or some kind of survey where people can ask those, you could effectively have a list at the start of the meeting to go, okay, when we approach Q&A, here's the list of questions that have already been answered. If you don't see your question, please add it to the list, and you can then have a voting system, for example. So if if you agree with somebody's question or statement and you have it, rather than them having to write it out as well or in a different way, they can simply thumbs up or heart, a different contribution. And again, the more you can do with that, anonymizing the playing field can go a long way. So virtual whiteboards can be very good. If you have a tool, whether that's Klaxoon, which has the whiteboards, I know Teams has them. If you can allow people almost like a digital space where you can pose the questions, you can have the questions on the screen and go, okay, you got a couple of minutes to answer this question and allow people to add sticky notes. You could give people a couple of minutes then to kind of volunteer their ideas. Then you can go, okay, the next stage, everyone has had the opportunity to volunteer their ideas. Now, let's look at let's prioritize these. How would you rank them, Drew? And it could be if you're getting people to ask questions, let's prioritize the most pertinent questions, or it could be let's rank the ideas that we think are the best ideas. If you've gone down that true anonymity route and that's getting a lot of thumbs up, then you could be the janitor in the organization, in the same training session as the CEO, but at least everyone has had the same opportunity to contribute, and everyone has had that opportunity to contribute their thoughts, and there's been kind of no visual hierarchy. So, because this isn't the most vocal person in the room, always with their hand up, therefore being spoken. Um, I think one of the things we need to be careful at in doing as trainers is picking on individuals who aren't speaking. I know there's the temptation there to try and force that engagement, but some people are just passive listeners. It doesn't mean that they're not engaged. But if you have any breaks or interactions, particularly um, those kind of water cooler moments, it's an opportunity to check in. So you haven't necessarily got to wait to the session or anything else. Use those opportunities to go. How are you feeling the session so far? Have you had the opportunity to ask the questions you want to, or to make the points you're looking to do? And by doing it in those more personal sessions, then they're not going to be the deer in the headlights, that freeze or fawn response to being asked a question on the spot. Um, I think it would be one way, or to be very clear in your instructions. So again, coming back to the smaller teams point I had earlier, if you can set the expectation that okay, in this hour training, I'm going to have 3 or 4 interaction points. Ideally, we'd hear from each team, and I would like to hear from a different person in that team as we come round to, unless you feel comfortable, unless you don't feel comfortable to do so. It will allow you then to yeah, try and hear from that rotation of people, and therefore, if you are reaching the session and you haven't heard from someone yet, there's that opportunity to kind of bring them in once more. It's a kind of, oh, I haven't heard from you yet. Do you have any thoughts on this? And if not, be respectful of that. And um, and also, I guess one of the art or the skills of facilitation is if somebody says, "Oh, what we discussed or my thoughts have already been covered by someone else." You can do some follow up of, okay, is there something that really stood out for you in the conversation, or is there something that challenged your thinking? It's it could be just. our 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 roles as facilitators or as trainers should be ideally to kind of facilitate those conversations because as I said, if I delivered a session on neurodiversity, as I have done earlier this morning, I myself have my experiences in neurodivergent individuals. Those aren't going to be the same as someone else who's grown up in the same circumstances as me. But if they were autistic and or black or female, do you know, they're or from a less fluent, fa less financially stable background, all of these things are going to make a difference to what they bring to the table. So I think all of us have things to contribute. All of our ideas are valid, and hopefully, I know I've been speaking out a while, but hopefully that's kind of addressed the kind of question in terms of hearing from a diverse group of people. The more you can keep the groups small, it allows people, to have to have that richer environment, especially if you have a big group and there hasn't been that time at the start of the session to say, "Hi, I'm Mike Osborne from Accessible Me," um, you risk, if the people don't know each other, you risk a lot of that time in that first breakout going, "Oh, who are you then?" Well, I'm so and so from this thing, this is my thoughts. And then you close the breakout room or you close the activity, and actually, all they've done so far is the introductions. They haven't addressed your conversation. So, by keeping the groups small and focused, you're more likely to then go, okay, everyone has had that same opportunity to contribute and be heard. So hopefully that answers your question. And if not, please feel free to challenge me or expand. And I am conscious of time. I know we only got 6 minutes left on the clock, and your colleague has had to drop off. If you have any additional thoughts, again, please do ask them here. This is a safe space in order to do that. And if you want a follow up, we can absolutely do that and get it in.
Sorry, I was trying to unmute
It's
myself.
okay.
No, I think yeah, it's been good. It's been what you shared has in a way like validated, I think, a lot of the practices that we
Yes.
already do, and I just think it's always a bit challenging when you work online as well, because there is that lack of like you can't really see, what's going on as well.
Yes.
So you kind of just have to yeah, I think that something is a bit it's a bit more challenging, but I think putting these things in place and as well it's yeah, that like having a consult like a form to fill out at the start, kind of sharing any particular needs and so on, and then at the end having a bit of that feedback as well is kind of like
Yeah.
a way to like make sure that you're prepared, and then at the end making sure that yeah, any areas of improvement. But yeah,
One of
um
the things I would encourage most individuals or businesses to do is to ra- quite often the temptation will be, okay, tell us about your accessibility needs. There'd be like an area to disclose on a form. The more we can move towards a almost a menu of accessibility. So to go, okay, in joining today's sessions, we have enabled closed captions. If you'd like to turn on the captions, this is how you do it, so you can let them know what's there. Um, if you, for example, you have the luxury of having somebody signing on to let people know that you have the signer and this is how you pin them, for example, but by educating people on what accommodations you have done, is a great way to do it. And if I threw the example out there, if you had somebody joining your webinar or your face-to-face meeting, one has one has struggles with bright lights, and they would get kind of migraines induced by the kind of bright atmosphere, and another person who has low vision and therefore needs it bright in order to see. How would you cater for both? So you kind of get the cost going. And if you go with the bright option and then provide darkening glasses, both people could partake in your session and do and have the same experience. You're not creating different experiences for different people. You know, both people are in the same room, but a small adjustment, such as the darkening glasses, ha enabled you to have both people there. Another example would be if someone is neurodivergent, they might not like an open plan setting, whereas an open plan setting is almost essential for somebody who is deaf and hard of hearing because they rely on those line of sight, to be able to lip read and for the signing. So I think the more you can let people know what support is there. So, for example, if you know you have a hard of hearing group and you have the signer, if you can position people in the room, if it's a physical space, if you can educate people on how to pin the signer, if it's an online space, or just making sure that you have those captions available, are going to go a long way. And now I've highlighted that they're not perfect, and that is fine. But again, also consider tools such as I don't know if you're familiar with any AI note-taking tools such as Otter or Fireflies, but by having them join your meeting, one of the things that's very good is by the time you close the meeting, within a few minutes after, you've got a summary of what was discussed. You have any action items, and you have a full written transcript. That transcript is something you could, if you record the session like I have done today, that transcript can then be converted into the closed captions file. And if I now put today's recording on YouTube, all of a sudden, people can go back in their own time. They can follow. They've got the captions if they want to, and if they are just looking to skim because I spoke too slowly for them or whatever, they can work through this list, find what they need to, and get out. So it allows us to cater to different learning preferences. If I'm not somebody who wants to join an hour-long session and I would prefer the highlights in a summary, I think these tools are really good for inclusion because and again by having them you can say, okay, I know many of you will be tempted to take your own notes today. We don't discourage that because the art of writing things down is very good for memory and recall, but the session is being recorded and transcribed. We will make the recording available after the session. That way, if somebody has ADHD, for example, and they would struggle to make notes and listen at the same time, you're increasing the ability to be present. So, again, these are all things that make a difference. Now, I appreciate we've hit 1 o'clock. Do you have a hard stop? And because if you need to disappear, that's fine. And we can also continue the conversation. If you want me to do something a bit more bespoke to either of your teams, then we're very happy to do that. All
Sorry,
good.
my mute's taken ages. I do have to jump off. I have to
That's
go
fine.
to another
Well,
meeting.
thank you so much for
But
joining,
no,
and again, my sincere apologies for being late to the call.
no worries. I was late too. So thank you
Okay,
so much.
no worries. Take care,
Yeah,
and thank you again, Caitlin, for joining as well. So for everyone who's joined today, thank you for listening. And if you're catching up on not on demand, I forget what the word is on our YouTube, then then please watch this space. I will share the recording with you, and you can follow back if you need to. But thank you for
okay.
joining, and I'll be in
Thank
touch.
you. Bye bye.
Take care.